So hello again. Some of you might be just joining us. I had the pleasure of working with Jeff to organize this thing. I'm Jade Roberts. I'm in Sydney at UNSW, and Lee Roberts will be helping me today. We will have chat open, so please feel free to put in your questions at any time in the chat space. There's also a Jamboard that you can log into, and that's for us to capture comments or things that you'd like us to keep. And Jeff and the committee will be collecting them. So I'll put that link up in just a minute. Our session is called In the Field During/After COVID-19. We have 4 amazing presentations. I had the pleasure of watching the videos already to prepare. So I won't say too much because they will cover the ground for you. We will start with Associate Professor Arijit Sen from the University of Wisconsin. Then it will be Professor Brian McGrath and Tommy Young from the New School. The third presentation will be by Professor Kobayashi from Kyoto University. And then the last one will be by Professor Chelan Pashalar, I hope I said that right, and Dr. George Hallowell from North Carolina State University. What we'll do is Lee will go ahead and play those presentations for everybody so we can save some time. We'll save all of the questions for the end, but if you're afraid you'll forget, just put it in the chat space and we'll get going. So, Arijit, please, the floor is yours.
Hi, my name is Arijit Sen. I think Lee is going to play the movie, so I'm just not going to bother about that. I just want to thank you very much for coming in. I teach a field school at Milwaukee, and this story is from the Milwaukee Field School.
Can everybody see that screen okay?
Yes. Good morning, and thanks for coming. This paper offers an argument that fieldwork and field schools should act as platforms that challenge our established conventions and ways of discerning knowledge, not merely as a place to collect information. We hold our disciplinary methods sacrosanct. For those of us working in the field of architecture and urban analysis, those methods include a careful study of the material world, how it looks, what it is made of, how it is used, how it is patterned, and what it symbolizes. Fieldwork in this context refers to the way we understand the world around us, document and analyze its qualities, organize information, and evaluate it as worthy or not. Yet those very habitual and taken for granted methods of discerning the material and social world can render us blind. Our traditional modes of data collection are built for a world of power and permanence. We record buildings as visible objects in a landscape, cities as organized around a grid of property lots and infrastructure, and landscape as a contiguous territorial system demarcated by edges. We are trained to ignore the world of the marginalized, discarded, and leftover people as deviant, as aberrations, as blight, and as problems. Many marginalized people experience their world differently than us. Their modes of discernment are embodied. Their histories are transmitted orally. The ephemeral sounds, smells, and sensory experiences of their world are not found in our traditional archives. Since 2012, Milwaukee's Buildings, Landscapes, Cultures Field School has served as a collaborative platform for students, scholars, and community residents to explore methods of data collection, documentation, and analysis that may help us see our everyday material world differently, to capture the elements of human experience that traditional methods of architectural documentation and ethnographic studies tend to miss. Our fieldwork exceeds objective data collection, and the field school becomes a place to collectively reproduce an egalitarian and equitable world. That process includes deep listening, oral histories, history harvests, community-led walks, background research in city archives, and a careful spatial documentation of buildings and landscapes that matter to our collaborators. A commitment of time and trust is important because our methodological discoveries emerge serendipitously during our long and discursive engagement in the field alongside community members. The summer field school stretches into fall and into fall spring semesters when scholars work alongside community residents to build gardens, furniture, sheds, hold art exhibits and events, and community barbecues. When COVID struck, the pandemic made face to face engagement impossible, and we were forced to explore alternative ways to re engage our community partners. During the summer of 2020, we designed a series of interactive zines with the goal that these documents should spur conversations without us being present as facilitators. So we stuffed these zines inside bags filled with fresh, locally grown produce and delivered them on a weekly basis to block leaders. The leaders then distributed these bags to their neighbors while engaging the latter in conversation across the fence, on their front yards, and alongside sidewalk verges. In a community that is threatened by a lack of fresh food and safe spaces, these outdoor conversations around healthy food became social catalysts in a world stalled by the epidemic. The pandemic made visible some of the weaknesses of our social system. Despite a lack of access to good health care, fresh food, well paying jobs, or good schools, these communities had survived a long history of racism, neglect, poverty, and scarcity simply because of spaces, relationships, and organization that sustained human interactions and fostered social ties. The pandemic impacted this vitality because it halted mundane conversations, everyday collaborations, and face to face social interactions. Block matriarchs locked themselves indoors, urban growers stayed away from their gardens, and teenagers disappeared from porches. Suddenly, by its very absence, we realized the importance of the commons as social infrastructure in Milwaukee's segregated and marginalized communities. Our focus during the 2021 summer field school then was directed towards the study of what constitutes what Sylvia Federici calls the shared commons. Every day for 3 weeks, we continuously walked in the neighborhood with local and academic experts, each brainstorming with us ways to decode the world that we share. We looked at front porches, shared spaces, seasonal garden lots, communal orchards, pocket parks, and even illegal dump sites. And we began to recognize that our ocular-centric methods focusing on permanent buildings, property lots, infrastructure, street layout, and daytime data collections offered fraught tools. The commons we discovered were networks of spaces and situations that are often physically disconnected but socially related systems. While as architects and planners we are trained to look for propinquity of cultural and territorial proximity, the commons are often a system of settings, activities, flows of people, microclimates, and ecologies mediated by humans and non-human actors. In the context of Washington Park, these were geographically dispersed gardens maintained by Hmong gardeners, connected by growers, butterflies, and topography. So if you go to our website, you'll find story maps showing a network of garden sites, public art, and other forms of shared spaces. Now, be experiential. It could be made of homes, businesses, and porches, activated during everyday practices of care and mutual aid, or a network of memorial art, murals, adornment on porches, signs of flamingos on front yards, painted rainwater barrels, or embellishment on street edges that is uniquely encountered by our residents during their everyday travels. Commons also included dump sites and homeless encampments that, due to their location and invisibility, reproduced what Samuel Truth calls fugitive landscapes. Now, I offer these examples to demonstrate how cultural significance doesn't always work in the form of appearances, that is, ornaments, building form, and material improvements. Capturing soundscapes, mapping movement, documenting short-lived events, Learning to see spaces in between buildings and mapping network systems of sites may enrich our fieldwork and help us articulate invisible worlds that escape our narrow, vision centered methods. What does such methods of discerning the commons offer us, and what are its pitfalls? As always, rendering visible that which is obscure makes these spaces and its users subject to the actions of discipline and punishment from the city and its agents of surveillance and injustice, the police, inspectors, planners, architects, academics, gentrifiers, even well intentioned liberal do gooders. But it also empowers local residents, and if carefully integrated within civic conversations at the local level, this knowledge leads to powerful acts of local resistance against structural forms of injustice. At our field school, we have seen local gardeners share their skills to empower a community, practice acts of care to resist food insecurity, crime, delinquency, and environmental injustice, and even encourage younger adults to become civic guardians.
We've been going to those spaces doing activities, and the Regent and his students have participated in a lot of those and helped organize those. They created planters and benches so that they can be installed at the park. They're listening to what the people in the neighborhood are saying, and they're giving us the support that we need. Like, we couldn't afford to pay architects to draw up all of these plans, but they're doing it for us. So it's not only writing about it, but they all actually made impact.
Thank you for coming. More information is available at our website.
Thanks so much, Arijit. All right, we're going to move on to the next presentation, but I'd like to ask Brian and Tommy to say hello before Lee hits play.
Hello, it's Brian.
And it's, oh, there's
It's Tommy, yes. Hello, everyone.
all right, Lee, I think you can hit play.
Mea culpa. In January 2020, 10 students from Chulalongkorn University arrived at Chiang Mai Airport, a short hop from Bangkok. 12 Parsons students flew in from New York, Manila, Prague, Rio de Janeiro, Zurich, Boston, Houston, Cairo, Karachi, Dhaka, and Beijing. They all met at Doi Home Guest House in the foothills of the Mekong Dam. Chiang Mai comprises 2 rivers and 2 cities. One is the modern sprawl along new highways from the historical center on the Mae Ping. The second is the intricate network of rice farming villages within the Mae Kwang watershed. I apologize to Mother Earth for the carbon footprint generated by 3 years of international student field workshops. It is no longer possible, even beyond the risks of COVID, under the present conditions of the climate crisis. While we're proud to show the results of these workshops, we're now searching for ways to continue our cooperative partnership with the villagers remotely.
From Doi Home, 3 vans shuttled us from Doi Home along the northeast radiating highway to the Outer Ring Road. Both offer lessons in the ribbon development strangling the land of a million rice fields, as land zoned for agricultural practices turns into commercial strips and gated communities. We traveled between 2 city metabolisms, one along the radial and ring highways, and another, an off-road city village network where we visited 4 farming settlements, separated by wet rice growing paddy fields. Our drawings are spatial ethnographies of the lives and stories of ordinary villagers maneuvering in the desicata between these 2 worlds. Just off the highways, a complex of winding rural roads cross a community-managed irrigation system, comprising a matrix of care that has proved resilient during the previous shocks, such as the economic crisis of 1997 and the extreme floods in 2011.
The 7-kilometer stretch of the Mekong that passes under the Outer Ring Road has been my backyard for 20 years. From my home, I learned to navigate the winding rural roads and the off-road trails for bicycles, motorcycles, and pedestrians along the river and major canal embankments. This large landscape comprises a matrix of care, consisting of 4 villages, 4 weirs and canals irrigating 4 large rice fields. Over the years, I was able to befriend informants at each weir and village. The keepers of the weirs included an obsessive builder of riverside shelters, where he took care of stray dogs, a favored shady fishing spot at the bottom of the second weir, a woodworker on a small peninsula between the third weir and a canal, and a fish hatchery and water hyacinth harvesting station before the fourth weir. This fieldwork framed the basis of 3 years of workshops focusing on the 4 villages.
Below each weir are the rice fields and villages that they nurture. Village 1, Bansansi, occupies the southeast corner of a small rice field, with a temple and school situated on the northwest corner. Within the village, we have been welcomed by a group of young sisters who have been expanding an indigo dye factory in their mother's family compound, selling t-shirts to local and Bangkok tourist markets. Several Christian missionaries circled the village, and the school kids we talked to were Hill tribe orphans and the children of glassworkers from Burma. There is a large woodworking compound further south, and it is only during the last workshop that we met the matriarch of the village, who creates needlepoint embroidery as source work for fashion designers. She embodied the architectural space as matrix of care and the matrilineal compound houses of the villages, and fulfilled the feminist framing of the workshops, as articulated by Sulamith Hines Potter's fieldwork on family structure in Chiang Mai.
Over the course of 3 workshops, we have witnessed the demolition of the old wood temple at the east end of Village 2 and its new construction in concrete. The village stretches west from the temple to a community space next to the river. South of the temple is the former headman mother-in-law's compound. A gate between her house and a row of rental rooms for migrant workers is an outdoor living room next to the former headman family home. As headman, he built a working model of King Rama IX's sufficiency economy, a way for the kingdom's farmers to be self-sufficient and to absorb the shocks of future global economic crises following the catastrophe of 1997. Next to a house, the headman ran a small outdoor restaurant to attract interest and serve farm-to-table food. Beyond a composting vermiculture, chicken, and livestock area is a fish pond surrounded by vegetable gardens, and behind a dozen rice paddies fed by one of the small canals we had just crossed.
The retired headman of Village 3 occupies his mother-in-law's compound in the heart of the village. Here he described his multiple community efforts over the years. At the river, he built a public sala, a covered pavilion, which serves as a meeting and educational center for maintaining water quality and the fish habitat. A short stroll up northwest is a community garden for organic vegetables and composting shared by the villagers. At his house, the elder demonstrated a fermented banana puree technique of reducing water microbes, which inspired a student project to scale up the process. The road continues past a car repair and plastic bottle recycling compound, which inspired a project to create a circular economy in the village. Finally, the road leads to the village temple, which occupies an idyllic spot amidst the largest stretch of intact rice fields and its new meditation center.
I live next to Village 4, which has close access to the handicraft highway to the south. As a result, the village has a number of convenience stores, as well as ceramic tile and a woven handbag showroom and workshop. The temple is very popular and is adorned with elaborate paper lanterns and umbrellas during New Year and Buddhist holidays. Our main informant was the matriarch of a compound house at the heart of the village, who runs a noodle shop at the southern gate to the compound, where it is easy to interview her and some customers. Behind the noodle shop is the small office of her brother, a medium or exorcist who can help with problems related to ghosts. At the north gate of the compound, a house and shop is rented for traditional massage. The compound provides a spatial matrix of care, providing nourishment for the body, mind, and spirit.
Tracing the Land of a Million Rice Fields explores how contemporary design-based fieldwork nurtures a structural understanding of what we call a matrix of care. The dense rice farming villages, composed of dynamic matrilineal compound houses within community irrigation networks, comprise the majority of land use in the Mekong Valley. And our structural knowledge goes beyond single projects or villages and can inform larger planning decisions. Student projects are our gifts in return for the villagers' hospitality. We are always pleased to see when some of our discussion initiate small-scale action when their drawings are framed and displayed in the elder's home. Our spatial ethnographies of the Mekong Valley offer a radical shift towards a dynamic, patchy, and diffuse urban form that is not part of the borrowed modern planning vocabulary, but has a substantial history that we found necessary to document.
While the Chiang Mai workshops have been the basis of the senior capstone studio in the BFA program at Parsons, they also have been conducted as part of Chulalongkorn's design experiment workshops called DEX. This January, I conducted a DEX workshop during the COVID lockdown in Bangkok. Called The Ecology of a Soy, each student conducted fieldwork within a 5-minute walk of their homes. The fieldwork consisted of short walks dispersed across the Bangkok metropolitan region, some next to family homes, some from their apartments. Together, they provide considerable information about contemporary life in the entire Bangkok region. One project in the heart of the city near Victory Monument documents the slow dance between cars, backup truck vendors, motorcycle taxi drivers, and the many students who occupy the small dormitory apartments in the area. The slow treatment of the soy is matched by the slow food preparation, where vendors cook fresh to the customer's tastes, spicy, sour, salty, sweet. This workshop is a model for the future of fieldwork, starting from the home, but networked across multiple field sites into larger scale fields of action to face the twin challenges of social inequity and the climate crisis.
In parallel to the remote spatial ethnographic work in Ecology of a Soy, during quarantine in January 2021, I was preparing the start of my own fieldwork in New York. Through weekly walks and auto ethnography, I started documenting 2 neighborhoods in New York, Sunset Park and Jackson Heights. Photography, videography, and walking become tools that provide agency to microhistories that are embedded in the neighborhood. As transcripts, townhouse stoops, building fronts, balconies, streets, and sidewalks become a larger matrix that is embedded with services and care in the neighborhood. These glimpses are then transcribed into sketches, modeled, and into drawings exploring the neighborhood's hybridization of occupancy. As I am wrapping up for the summer and now calling in from Pittsburgh, the research has cultivated in relationships and future remote ethnography, where on-the-ground local stewards and students become local ethnographers and knowledge bearers who continues to collect traces of the shifting landscapes.
Thank you so much, Brian and Tommy. We're going to move on to the next presentation by Hiro. Hiro, could you say hello?
Okay, hello. I'm Kobayashi from Kyoto University. And today I'm introducing my bamboo greenhouse project. Please start my presentation. The presentation title is Bamboo Greenhouse Project, Self-Building Bamboo Structure for Community Engagement and Student Field Learning. Spread of abandoned bamboo forests in Japan. Bamboo forests had been in good conditions before by the cycle of maintenance, material use, and harvest. Material use was for crafts, agriculture and fishery, and housing. However, especially from 1970s, bamboo was changed for modern products. And then the cycle in bamboo forest was disappeared. So this is the reason why abandoned bamboo forests are increasing in many places in Japan. So there are social problems of abandoned bamboo forests. Abandoned bamboo forests outspread to farmlands and residential areas by underground stems. Such bamboo forest conditions allow many wild birds to come for eating bamboo shoot, and then access to farmlands near bamboo forest to damage much agricultural product. The government provides subsidy to maintain bamboo forests, but not to be sustainable nor effective. These are serious social problems in many places in Japan. Development of bamboo greenhouse. In such a social problem, bamboo greenhouse was developed to revive the cycle in bamboo forest in modern contexts for keeping a good Satoyama environment as well as encouraging agricultural activities in local areas. We started the development of bamboo greenhouse in 2009. First, we focused on the structure performance because of no example of bamboo greenhouse structure before. Second, we focused on easy self-building, as any local people can be engaged in the bamboo greenhouse construction by themselves. Third, more flexible farming space was developed with no pillar inside for usability. And then the current type was completed by the integrated idea of 3 trials in 2014. Bamboo greenhouse is really a field practice working with local people for rural development. Bamboo greenhouse application to local societies. Local people self-constructed more than 30 bamboo greenhouses so far in many places in Japan. In some projects, we supported the construction as well as field research there for rural development. I'm showing some example of supporting bamboo greenhouse projects. This is a Senjo bamboo greenhouse for encouraging local people in a depopulated mountain village. After the construction, some researchers continue to do the field research for rural revitalization. This is Irodori Farm bamboo greenhouse for starting up farming activities of a young farmer. He obtained bamboo material with no expense from abundant bamboo forest and built 3 bamboo greenhouses for his livelihood. Some researchers evaluated the economical effect of bamboo greenhouse for starting up young farmer. This is Sasayama bamboo greenhouse for local contribution activities by agricultural high school students. We had a workshop to introduce the bamboo greenhouse idea to high school students, and then they practiced the maintenance activities in bamboo forest and built a bamboo greenhouse for local people. Dissemination of bamboo greenhouse to local societies. We have some activities to disseminate bamboo greenhouse in local areas. First, Creative Commons license. Bamboo greenhouse is open source model. Anyone who is interested in bamboo greenhouse can construct under some conditions with attribution, non-commercial, and no derivative works. The basic request is to construct bamboo greenhouse to be beautiful, which means to be a part of landscape and a good harmony with nature. Second, bamboo greenhouse Facebook, starting from April 2015. Anyone who is interested in bamboo greenhouse can participate in the Facebook to exchange information for upgrading bamboo greenhouse performance and to share information about all bamboo issues promoting constant use in modern context. Third, bamboo greenhouse construction manual. The manual can be provided to the local people planning the bamboo greenhouse construction. Fourth, bamboo greenhouse workshop. We organized the workshop in 2019 to invite the local people who are interested in the bamboo greenhouse construction. They had a field visit, experience of construction, and a meeting for sharing information. It was so effective to motivate them for the construction in the future. From workshop participation to self-building, which means from experience to practice. We try to make a linkage between local people to transfer the knowledge and techniques of bamboo greenhouse construction. One person participating in the construction do the practice in his area. Other people also follow the same process. So this is the expecting dissemination scenario of bamboo greenhouse project. Increase of the Facebook participants under COVID-19 pandemic. Our life has been so limited by COVID-19 since last year. But the bamboo greenhouse project as open air activity in the rural area is comparatively still possible to do under the pandemic. Also, our lifestyle is changing to do more teleworks out of the company and looking more at the local area. This might be the reason why, after the first state of emergency on COVID-19 in Japan on April 7, 2020, the number of participants has been rapidly increasing, nearly 2,000 members now. Bamboo greenhouse as educational module for students' field learning. Field learning through bamboo greenhouse construction for first-hand experience. As mentioned in previous slide, students sometimes join the construction for supporting local people. At the same time, the construction gives a good opportunity for students to experience how bamboo material can perform as a structural component. It is very important for the students studying architecture to have a direct feeling of real construction. Bamboo greenhouse can be a good experience tool. Field learning through bamboo greenhouse construction for communication with local people. The construction gives a good opportunity for students to learn local nature and local life through the construction and communication with local people. Working together makes closer between students and villagers and easier to communicate each other. Bamboo greenhouse can be a good communication tool. COVID-19 pandemic is really a trigger event to change the sense of value for our life. One viewpoint is more harmony with the nature, I feel, by the bamboo greenhouse projects. Thank you for your listening.
Thank you so much for that one. Just as good in the second viewing. The next presentation will be by Chelan and George. Could you say hello?
Hello, everyone. I'm Chelan.
Hi, I'm George.
And Lee can hit play.
Welcome to our presentation titled Overcoming the Challenges of Participatory Community Design Practice. My name is Chelan Pashalar, and I'm here presenting with my colleague, George Hallowell. Through today's presentation, we will provide you with a brief overview and evaluation of participatory community design processes that we have utilized both before and during COVID-19 pandemic conditions. We will primarily focus on two cases that we facilitated in North Carolina in the United States. Through these cases, we will show you the range of tools and processes that we designed and use for face-to-face and virtual interactions. At the end of our brief presentation, we will also compare and provide a quick overview of strengths and weaknesses of traditional and virtual participatory methods that can inform the future post-pandemic community-engaged design practices. For over 50 years, there have been critical questions about how inclusive participatory design can function successfully. Some argue that poor and under-resourced communities have no power except through disruption. The idea of community-engaged design practice has become increasingly popular as an applied strategy among community partners and stakeholders. However, we have observed that inequalities have increased during the COVID-19 pandemic and therefore introduced new challenges for conducting inclusive design practice. Our question today is, how can an inclusive and participatory design process function successfully in post-pandemic times? What types of strategies can be used to engage and give a spatial voice to community members that can help to address their needs and expectations in future development efforts?
This slide illustrates the two cases of participatory community design that we facilitated in North Carolina. The first of the cases on the left side of the slide focuses on a pre-COVID traditional face-to-face participatory community effort that we accomplished within the southwest quadrant of Raleigh. This district has been undergoing rapid change and development over the last decade, including, among other things, the large university campus at the center of the district. The community is a combination of established neighborhoods, rapidly changing commercial zones, and newer areas of rental units and student housing. The second case on the right illustrates a large virtual community participatory process that was accomplished during the COVID-19 pandemic in Walltown, an African-American community located in Durham, North Carolina. This project began as a group of Walltown neighborhoods came together to discuss their concerns about how the redevelopment of an old abandoned mall might spur gentrification and undermine community success. The Uncovering Southwest Raleigh project was a long-term multidisciplinary research and design project involving the participation of North Carolina State University, City of Raleigh, and a wide array of stakeholder groups within this quadrant of the city. The mission of the project was to enhance and promote a healthy, creative, and economically sustainable quality of life for the district. One of the first steps was to create a database of background information using census, real estate, and GIS data, economic analyses, and a thorough historical context. The second step, and by far the most difficult, was to identify the perceptions of residents and businesses of the district and to determine the forces of change versus stabilizing influences. This step involved variations on traditional participatory design tools and processes, including extensive interviews of business and community stakeholders, numerous neighborhood meetings, community events, engaging with various local organizations, and large-scale residential and business online surveys. The project also included large public working sessions that involve group map making, in-person surveys, and extensive discussion forums.
The second project focused on the Walltown area, tackling this question: how can we give a spatial voice to the community that addresses their needs and expectations in the process of redeveloping an old mall site? This was a project we began working on during the COVID-19 pandemic. This timing presented us with significant challenges to include the public in the process and help the community to develop effective political action. So our team put in place this charrette process, which benefited from virtual participatory techniques and methods addressing the ongoing development efforts in the Walltown area. Our team of faculty and students from NC State University and UC Berkeley partnered with the Walltown community and helped them figure out how to spatialize their community goals. So we developed a pandemic-safe charrette process that spanned more than 2 days and benefited from new virtual techniques. The project team utilized Google Slides and Zoom applications, which are free and can be easily accessed and used by everyone. We also use Adobe drawing tools such as Illustrator and Photoshop, through which we were able to translate participants' voices real-time into spatial design considerations on the site. The development and preparation of the virtual charrette process was also participatory, engaging a focus group including community representatives. The project team and the stakeholders developed the workshop process, protocol, and interactive tools all together. The team also made sure that proper training through brief webinars were provided to the community ahead of the virtual charrettes. The interactive design game tools shown on this slide were developed and assigned to participants before the actual synchronous charrette sessions. Using Google Slides, participants were able to engage online with the games we provided. These games were designed to include simple tasks such as moving the pieces around the slide or writing notes. The games designed for this effort included 3 main tasks. The first was prioritization of 7 goals originally set by the community members. This helped the participants to better define the development vision for the site. The second task or gaming exercise aimed to connect each goal to a specific location on the site. This step enabled participants to think about the physical site conditions and start to imagine the spatial program and concepts for the future development. The third game involved the actual site planning process, including drawing or locating each use or activity setting on the site. The project team provided scaled blocks of varying uses of types, size, and heights of buildings. This task was subdivided into components including housing, retail or community centers, open spaces, and walking networks of streets and paths. Participants were able to cluster the blocks, creating varying forms and spatial programs on the site. They were also able to leave a note communicating their intentions and the narratives of their designs. From prioritizing goals to locating them spatially on the site, participants were able to visualize and understand how they wanted this old mall area to be developed in a way that will meet the expectations and the needs of the surrounding communities. Using this community input, the design team was able to develop more effective alternatives. During the first day of the synchronous charrette, all the input received from the design games was used to introduce each participant's vision and thoughts. On the second day of the synchronous charrette, the design team facilitated a real-time sketching session. This session involved community participants to engage in simultaneous visualization while they were engaged in discussions with their team as they reviewed each other's plan. During these discussions, the design team sketched several alternatives using Adobe drawing tools. The design team's screen was shared with all participants, so everyone was able to watch as their input was visually shaping the design of the project site.
Traditional participatory design processes in use prior to the pandemic have a number of strengths and weaknesses, some of which remain intact and others that have become even more challenging because of COVID. One of the strengths of participatory design is that it can help weave together communities through engagement and connection. In-person techniques such as interviews and on-site investigations are quite useful for dispelling misperceptions about a community and helping to uncover less visible stakeholders, such as renters or students. For example, we discovered that merely using census data to understand income levels in a neighborhood with a high percentage of students was misleading, since the true buying power of students is often a combination of both theirs and their parents' income. Looking at census block data for both the student and the parent gives a better picture of buying power in the district. Processes such as community events involving nonprofit groups or churches can also help uncover areas in transition, such as short-term rental housing or the in-between zones that are not in an established neighborhood. Traditional participatory design processes do have weaknesses, some of which are made worse by pandemic conditions. Extensive participatory design practice can be labor intensive, especially for in-person interviews or on-site analysis. It has always been difficult to schedule and promote large working events such as community gatherings with working sessions. Prior to the use of online communication, stakeholders have had the added time burden of traveling to neighborhood gatherings and working events. Overall, we discovered that many of the traditional methods of participatory community planning could still be incorporated during the pandemic, but they had to be carefully transformed into virtual or digital interactive techniques. The advantage of the transformation is that participants can engage from any location, such as home, workplace, or even outdoors. That can also mean greater ease of scheduling and less time commitment for traveling and commuting. The downside for under-resourced communities can be the lack of necessary equipment or sufficient internet connectivity. A virtual or online process also demands familiarity with online tools and applications such as Google Slides or Zoom meeting technology. Virtual or digital interactive processes can also allow community leaders and long-term residents to actively engage rather than become passive participants. The process can also be tailored to engage representatives from all backgrounds, including less visible community members. One of our greatest successes in the Walltown project was the ability to turn spoken ideas into visible images in real time in a virtual environment. We have drawn several conclusions from our efforts in participatory community practice by comparing projects that occurred before and during the pandemic. We see a great value in continuing to develop participatory tools that are adaptable to any condition, whether the team is on-site or remote. First, by fully leveraging existing virtual and online technologies, and then by investigating other possibilities such as virtual reality and smart gaming. From the Walltown project, we discovered that real-time and interactive visual communication can be very engaging and impactful, even for community members that are less likely to participate with more traditional processes. Finally, we contend that by developing more inclusive and effective community engagement processes, policymakers and developers are more likely to engage in conversations and support efforts on affordable housing, green practices, and community history and trends.
We would like to leave you with this quote from the leader of the Walltown Community Group, which we believe is a good summary of the value of the participatory community design process, not just in terms of the final outcome, but also in terms of engaging the voices of the community members in visualizing the future development opportunities that benefit the entire community. We hope this discussion has provided all of us with some valuable insights into current and post-COVID challenges and successful techniques for participatory community design practice. Thank you for your involvement in this webinar.
Thank you so much. All right, so we've gone through all four very quickly. Thanks for hanging in there, everyone. I'd like to open the floor for questions. If anybody would like to start, raise your hand just so that we don't get any interruption in the signals going through the internet. Would anyone like to start with a question?
Jade, there's one question in the chat from Brian. So we could start with that if no one else has a, yeah. So Brian asked, I don't know, Brian, if you'd like to do it live, or I can read what you posted.
No, sure, I'll do it. I just was interested that there were two projects, Midwestern and East Coast US cities, African-American neighborhoods, and two from, let's say, rural Asia, although our project is certainly urbanizing. It is rural villages. So I'm just wondering, I mean, I have some thoughts because I go back and forth between American cities and Asia about half-half. So I just was wondering if anyone had any thoughts about connections or lessons to be learned between the four examples.
Does anyone have any thoughts? So what are the commonalities or connections between the various projects that we just saw?
One of the things that I noticed was that there seemed to be a lot of challenges that all four projects described in order to deal with under-resourced communities. And I thought that was quite interesting, that all of the potential challenges that some of the earlier projects that talked about maybe pre-pandemic would only be made worse during the pandemic. So I thought there was an interesting tale to be told about how that same kind of projects might now happen during COVID and perhaps in the future. So.
Thank
I think one thing that was clear to me from all the presentations was the notion of scale, that how at an individual level, how people are addressing or resisting forms of injustice, and at a larger scale, at a structural level, whether we are talking about environment or we are talking about other forms of injustice. And I think everyone was looking at this particular, sometimes at multiple scales, sometimes at a very micro level scale. And I'm beginning to what the thing that I find common here is the fact that field work is not simply, even though it feels like it's out there in the field and you're looking at something specific, you're at the same time looking at multiple scales. And to be able to figure out a methodology that allows you to focus on a particular scale, but still be aware and cognizant of the other scales that exist.
I think what's interesting about all four is also this technique of using field work to capture fleeting histories that are usually not captured or are not written. And I think from using Zoom as kind of this brainstorming drawing board for the communities to mapping their villages and rowing and biking throughout the 4 villages to daily walks down an African American neighborhood in Milwaukee. It's really this notion of capturing fleeting histories or these really small histories that are in most cases never really written down by historians. And so what happens when these stories cascades into larger movements? I mean, I think that's what's really powerful, and I feel like it's a thread that begins to connect all 4 presentations.
I would love to respond to Arijit's comment. I was struck by the same thing that you were, from the very intimate kinds of projects that you guys do and the bamboo greenhouse. And so one of the things I was curious when I see the large crowd of people walking down the sidewalk of a neighborhood is actually the scale of the workshop itself and the number of people. And so one of the structural parts of our workshop was really working on 4 villages because we had 24 students and we never wanted more than 6 students to a village. Just enough that a headman could host in his house or someone, one of the matriarchs, could welcome around her sewing table or something, So I think scale is really important in field work, and I think that the human scale is probably the most essential thing.
Would anyone like to add anything else with regard to this question? Or even if it's tangential?
I have another issue that is also kind of important, and it's the notion of time. From the bamboo greenhouse project, which is basically environmental time in many ways, to the specificity of sitting down and doing online projects, which is ephemeral. We don't usually think clearly about what time means when we talk about space. And I think COVID has made us super aware of that, really aware from the environmental to the ephemeral. So that's another thing that I think we should all consider as field workers.
Sort of a related question in the chat from Maria, is that right? About specifically about the bamboo greenhouse project and how long these greenhouses last and whether they have to be rebuilt every year, which Maria points out is an inconvenience, but also a way to keep the skill set and the technology alive from year to year.
Okay, so Matt, the direction of the bamboo greenhouse depending on the conditions, right? So depending on the area, so the longest durability is 6 years so far. So I think quite long time to last the function, yeah. And but it depends on the quality of the construction as well by the community people. So, and also the quality of bamboo material. The quality is quite different depending on the area as well. But today, so I'm very glad to know that the same kind of community-based activities are conducted in the world. Yeah, and so yeah, I got a very high motivation to continue the bamboo greenhouse project. Yeah, Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I think this question ties in nicely with what Arijit said about time, because there is the assumption that when we design and build something, it is somehow permanent. But actually, to sustain that location as place requires multiple actors maintaining it, reviving it, instilling meaning in it, or changing it. So the fact that the bamboo greenhouse needs to be rebuilt, I would say, shouldn't be seen as a fault, or not that anybody's implying that, but there's this sense like, oh, you didn't do it well, you got to redo it. No, it's a part of making place, because people come back together to build it. And I speak from as a person who does research in Myanmar, where the construction of a stilt house is a regular rebuilding that creates community, even in very difficult times. So that's an interesting one. For those of us organizing this group has something to do with scales of commoning or scales of coming together that branch out. Like with the bamboo greenhouse, it's all over Japan. So the potential of it having a reach that reproduces or creates a place in distant locations that are somehow connected is really cool. Any other questions?
Shumei's got one.
So thank you everyone for the really wonderful presentation. I really enjoyed it and learned a lot. My question is about verbal communication. So I think your project all showed us how the issue of moving community engagement online is not only about access to internet or facility. It also has to do with the changing nature of communication. And I think most of us know that some people are just quiet or not being that comfortable in expression in verbal communication, but they are good in a variety of other forms of expression. And if we can be there in the field with them, we have many alternative methods to attempt those. So I mean, it seems to me each of you more or less are already trying to engage with sort of translator. So most of your methods seems to be hybrid with both physical element and virtual element. So I just wonder if any of you can talk about challenges like these and how you managed to solve that to some degree. I also have specific comments to Arijit and Kobayashi sensei. I really like the idea of sending Zing message with fresh food. I think that's really like wonderful, a wonderful demonstration of this hybrid communication. I just wondering if you've got any feedback from them. Due to limited of time, you can't really talk about it, but if there's any, I would be interesting to know. And to Kobayashi sensei, it's really interesting that the number of, the level of increased rapidly after COVID. Can you talk a little bit more about why? Anything other than people eager to have their own greenhouse in their community? So that's all of my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your question, Shumei. So regarding the participation of the Facebook, I always ask the participant why you are joining the Facebook page. So the most of the comment, so they are becoming more conscious of the nature or surrounding environment of their living place. So possibly in Japan, so most of the people just focus on the work so far before COVID-19. But during COVID-19, so they can have more time to look at the surrounding environment. And then, so I guess so they try to do some action. Yeah. for their life. So I think this is the main reason why of the rapid increase of the participation. And so I want to emphasize the constructing together or architecture can have a very big power without language, without the communication. So in my presentation, so you can see the many foreign students work together. So they can work together without the communication first, but during the construction, they communicate gradually somehow with the local people, and then they can learn more the Japanese culture or the situation in the rural area in Japan or something. So unfortunately, so the international student cannot go out from Japan for their field work in their country. So the activity is quite limited, but Bamboo Greenhouse sometimes can help them to join the field work in Japan. Yeah, so overcoming the linguistic barrier. Yeah, so this is my feeling.
Thank you. Thank you.
I just wanted to quickly respond about something else that with the zines, I realized our project has been developed as a collaborative ethnography project. So the idea is that we will co-write the results with our community members. Now, you cannot just, so I tried sending my papers over to the community members. They don't have time to read all that. So that's where the zine came in. The zine was simply, after 4 years of doing this, as they're telling us more and more stories, we are summarizing this in the zines, and then they're going back and talking with their community people. And then we have another event where we talk about the zines. But what's important about this was our process was deep listening, but the process the community people did was deep conversations, action-based conversations. So what happened is over a period of few years, I'm beginning to realize that what we do not account for in our research, community engaged research, is the power of serendipity. So power of things that are happening which are not planned. And I think what happened with the zines was because we were not involved, we just gave the zines and we simply asked them later on what happened. All kinds of events happen as a result of this exchange. And that, which is not within our power, the power of serendipity to actually make community action happen, has been something that we are now really focusing on, trying to figure out what that actually means. We're not even sure what it means right now.
Thank you.
There's kind of oh, sorry, go ahead.
And the zines sort of speak to the potential of not direct engagement, right? So in the virtual world, COVID world, maybe we could think about how to better support that. And there's another question, Lee, is that right?
There was a sort of related question from Noriko for George about keeping participants motivated through workshops, especially in hybrid situations. You know, what sort of techniques help sort of people stay involved in the process if it's a longer term engagement, which may be related to seeking out serendipity as part of the process. But George, I don't know if you want to respond to that.
Yeah, I think that's the way that Shumei, you asked the question originally about translation was very pertinent to our work too, because it's not just a matter of translating between languages or between cultures, but people engaging people's minds and translating what is a conceptual idea of design into a physical outcome. It's very difficult to engage people. And that's a challenge I'm sure we've all had in teaching classes and in doing seminars and being out in the field, is that you have to keep people engaged. So I think that's my primary answer. You lose some of the serendipity of being in one place at one time and working on a project like a bamboo greenhouse, right? And where you can just chat like around the water cooler, if you use an old expression. You don't have that so much in virtual presentations, but that is something that some of the tools we talked about did work in Walltown, that we were able to bring people together because they were all able to work on the same drawing board and chat with each other while they were doing it. There was some engagement and ability to tie people into it and to translate the sort of mental idea into a physical outcome.
Yeah, and I would like to add on what George is building on actually with his response, that what was really strong about the process, that visual expression. We might be speaking, different languages, or we might have different attitudes towards feeling shy to talk about our opinions. But one thing that people are really comfortable with when they start saying actually what they're thinking and what they are perhaps verbalizing verbally, and seeing it actually, how that is all coming together, everyone's points of view in front of them visually, that actually what makes a difference. And in terms of the virtual versus face-to-face engagement, actually with the Walltown case, I would say that we found out, and again, this is just for that particular specific case that we worked on, but we found out that actually people were more engaged. Because again, that idea of right in front of them, we were literally sketching. Yes, we were doing that face-to-face as well in the past when we will have our charrettes, but actually we were losing more people in those cases, that because it will be a little bit difficult for everyone to see what's going on, but with that screen interaction, people were seeing actually, okay, well, this is what I said, and this is what you said, and this is how all coming together. And then they start actually chatting with each other as well about, what works better, changing opinions, what was exciting actually for us to see. So it was more than the product, I would say, it was that process itself that was really meaningful for the community too.
Thank you. And I think we have 8 more minutes. We have another question in chat from Asan Suanari. Should I go ahead and read it, or Asan, do you want to speak up? Okay, I'll read it, I guess. So the question is to the panel. All of the cases are in rural or peri-urban areas. Have we found any intersections in both socially and physically between these rural and peri-urban areas and the urban areas? Are there conflicts or interactions that are correlated?
Yeah, if I may, thank you, Asan. That goes back to my original question. My experience in the U.S. is mostly in Baltimore, Maryland, and Newark, New Jersey, and so I found it remarkable that they're not peri-urban; they're vacancies and vacant lots and vacant properties in the inner city, and so, but the relationship between it's basically the breakdown of private property, and which creates the possibility for a commons, and so in our villages, it is a compound house, that's the commons, and in Baltimore, Newark, it's the necessity of forming communities. If you have 2 jobs, you're a single mom, and you gotta rely on the grandma next door. And so Tommy, I know, has worked in both Milwaukee and Chiang Mai. I don't know if you have a similar experience.
Yeah, I agree. I think and what's really interesting about these kind of interactions, or these places of these zones of contact, is actually the hybrids that come out of it and the temporality of these zones, right? So in Chiang Mai, the compound houses then becomes making spaces, dormitories that in a way adapts these new functions. But in Sunset Park, New York, you have these townhouses that become multi-generational homes where dad goes to work for a week and then come back only on the weekend, and the moms are really steps up and becomes kind of this mitigator between these families inside of these 3 floors townhouses in New York. And so all of a sudden this urban rural kind of relationships begins to blur, right, into these embodied actions that really transcends territorial grounds, and the way we begin to define rural and urban and the way we think about it.
Great, thank you. Anybody else have a question? For me, these 4 presentations are rich and actually very inspirational. After watching them, I felt very hopeful. And there are lots of various threads that we could pick up on. Maybe I'll invite you to put any thoughts that you might have in Jamboard, because we'll keep that. But everybody has talked about sort of more of the ethnographic approach of paying close attention, of deep listening, of walking on the street, and approaching understanding as not just a collection of data or permanent mappable phenomena, but other things that might escape our awareness. So that's something that I'm really into, and I'm glad that's come up. I'm sure everybody has something to share from your own research and experience. Another part that I found interesting was how everybody talked about the interlinking between the social and the spatial, because in the built environment, we are spatializing things, whether through mapping or building or design. So how does that come about, and how it can be a powerful tool? In Brian and Tommy's presentation, clearly the exploded diagrams are so communicative. And then in Chalan and George's presentation, how you used, Adobe software to help the participants see and come to sort of a participatory understanding of what's happening in their neighborhood is all really hopeful, I think. And I jotted some notes about how we're all working in larger contexts that are intersections of political, social, economic, and ecological. Several people talked about the more than human aspect of what we're doing and how we need to be more careful, or how we can proceed as educators and practitioners. Anybody else have any thoughts after watching the presentations and our discussion?
I do have to tell all the participants that I really see the amount of work you've done. I felt it. I know during COVID, doing this was practically impossible. So the fact that everybody did this really says a lot about the commitment that everyone on the screen in front of me has. So thank you.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, and there's a note about the globalized interlinking between Chiang Mai and New York. And I was very happy to hear Burma when in Tommy's slide. Yeah. All right. So
I'll just say to everybody that I've posted the questions from our chat into the Jamboard. So we do have a permanent record of those as well as the recording.
Great. If not, we're invited to jump back into the big room.
I see Jeff is here. I don't know.
Yes,
okay.
We still have 1 more minute. We'll finish. We're officially done in a minute at 10:30 my time. But if you're done already, feel free to wrap up, and we look forward to seeing you again tomorrow.
Okay, so nothing in the big room. Okay, all right, great.
Great session. I was able to come in and out.
Well, thank you everybody for your wonderful presentations. I look forward to seeing everybody again tomorrow. And have a good evening or good day or whatever, wherever you are.
Thank you so much.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. It was wonderful.
Thanks.
Kobayashi Sensei, I was gonna ask if there was time about your in one of your slides. You said that you hope what you asked was that people didn't modify the design when they used them in different places, and I was curious about what you see as the future evolution of the design, and whether there's in different parts of Japan there are different needs that might need a different design.
Yeah, so I think a bamboo greenhouse is very similar to vernacular architecture. Yeah, so my main research topic is also the vernacular architecture and the conservation. So I can learn a lot from the vernacular architecture method. Yeah, this is a result of bamboo greenhouse project. Yeah. So please join the Facebook page if you like.
Definitely, yeah. Sounds great.
Anyway, thank you very much for your arrangement and effort today. I think it's a very good conference. Jade, also thank you very much.
Oh, no worries. Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Yeah,
Definitely my pleasure.
This is the first time to join the APRU conference, and the Shumei,
Yes.
Professor Shumei invited me or forced me to join.
I will have to thank her for that too then.
Shumei is a close friend, so I applaud her for doing that.
Yeah. She said so.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you very much, and good opportunity for me today. Yeah, so I'm joining tomorrow as well.
Yes, me too. And I would love to come and see the bamboo greenhouses in Japan someday. So
yes,
someday.
Please.
Yeah.
Please come to Japan. Jade and Lee.
As soon as we can.
Yes. Yeah.
Not 1 year later, maybe 3 years later.
Yeah. We'll see. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I'm going to leave the room myself, and we'll see you tomorrow, I hope.
Yeah. Thank you.
Sayonara.
Good day.
All right.